Hi, I'm Bruce Fenstermacher. I was the Minuteman III Combat Crew Commander at F.E. Warren Air Force Base, Wyoming. In 1976, my deputy Bill and I were on alert. So to stay awake, we were listening to the communication between our flight security controller, our FSC. He was the topside high-ranking, one of the higher-ranking policemen, and the SAT team members, security alert team members, who were the lower-ranking fellows that went out to the sites. They were out on the site checking our LFs, our launch facilities, were the, you might want to call them silos, but they're officially launch facilities. And the FSC said, "Stop the car, pull over." And Bill and I looked at each other and said, "What kind of official command is that? Get out of the car, look around. Do you see anything?" They first said no, they didn't say anything, and then holy mackerel, there's this white pulsating object, a big white light. And the FSC said, "Where is it?" And he said, "Oh, it looks like it's 8-10 miles north. It looks like it's pretty close to the launch control facility, or the LCF, where the FSC was." So he said, "Okay, come back to the launch control facility." So it ends, Bill and I looked at each other and we hit the hotline to the FSC and say, "What's going on?" He said, "Captain, you're not going to believe this, but right above me right now is this big white pulsating object with some colors in between the pulsations." I think he said red and green or red and blue. I don't really remember exactly. I said, "Can you describe it for me?" He said, "Well, I think it's a cigar-shaped object, like a fat cigar. It looks to be 80 to 100 feet above the launch control facility and 40 to 50 feet long." I said, "Okay, keep me abreast of what's happening." So we were talking for a while, stayed there for, I don't know, a minute, minute and a half, and it slowly and very silently moved along the access road. And I said, "Keep me updated." So Bill and I talked to each other and say, what should we do? Well, let's just hang in there for a second. Then he said he called us back down. He said it appears to have stopped right above LF1, the Launch Facility Missile Silo 1. Now this thing's messing with my missiles. So we contacted Mission Control and said there's some unidentified object, bright white light, cigar-shaped, started out over the launch control facility, ended up at a first LF. And the sergeant said, I said, and we sent the SAT team, which we had sent the SAT team from their location back. It would have to go pass by the launch control facility to LF1. And he said, "Call me back if it eats the SAT team." And he hung up. So Bill and I didn't think that was a very good response. We asked FSC to make sure the SAT team was on their way back to the launch control facility to go to LF1, and he said they were. It moved down to another silo, or appeared to move above the silos, again silently. And so we said, we called the launch control facility, and they started to give us the same reaction. And I said, let me talk to an officer. I want to talk to an officer. So they brought on a lieutenant who was hesitant, and I said, "Listen, you need to log this. This is something that's messing with our missiles. If you don't log this, I will call the base commander at 2:30 in the morning, wake him up, and tell him the story and get you to log this. Oh, don't do that, we'll log it." So a little while later, a more senior NCO called us back, and Bill had been keeping personal notes in addition to logging everything. So Bill gave him an exact report as to what we saw. It was still going down this access road. And the SAT team they had to pull into the launch control facility to get gas. Then their car was acting up. They couldn't drive more than 5 miles an hour. And I said, I don't care, go out there. You know, if it takes you a long time, go out there. And then about 4 o'clock, the FSC said it suddenly went up from that last launch facility and just went like that, disappeared to a dot in the sky and then disappeared in total. So at our next crew, every hour you talk to the other crews, you know, in our case, Papa, Quebec, Romeo, Sierra, Tango. I think I said that alphabetically correct. But we talked to them and we told them our story and we got the laughter from everybody. And then when we hung up, Quebec called us back and said, we had it happen at our LFs and over our launch control facility. I said, how did they react when you reported? He said, report it. Do you think we're crazy? We're not going to report that. Well, we said, we reported. They said, if you say that we're involved, we'll deny it. And of course, later on we did, and they did too. But our next reaction then was to go back to the command post and make sure they were recording things, told them it disappeared. So that was it for that. We got relieved the next morning, not too many hours later. We went topside and the FSC was in a chair, a bigger chair, kind of like balled up in a fetal position. He was afraid, scared to death, in my opinion. And he said he couldn't go to bed because he was relieved. It was time for him to go to sleep. He couldn't because he was that affected by it. When we came up the next morning, the FSC was in his chair in a fetal position, and we talked to him and tried to calm him down. We couldn't calm him down, oddly enough. But I said, what happened to the SAT members? Why didn't they get to each of the LFs? What was there, you know, they had to get fuel, they had to get flashlights, they had the car was going 5 miles an hour. And he said, if you promise not to tell on them, I'll tell you what really happened. And they were conveniently not there. They were out when we were relieved. So he said, what they told me was they weren't going to go to an LF that had that thing above it, period. And in fact, they'd driven back to the launch control facility, went in there, and that's where the truck stayed while I'm frantically trying to get somebody out to check it out. Bill and I talked about it when we went back home. We picked up Quebec because that's the way you do, pick up a crew on the way back, or you're the crew that's dropped off. Save sack gas, I guess. Picked them up, and all we could talk about was this incident, but they reassured us that they were not going to come forward, and that if we included them, they would deny it. And I said, of course we're going to include you, because it's true. We went back, my flight commander, which was, I think, Phil Moore at the time, but he wasn't in the office, so there was somebody representing him. We talked to them, told them the story, and went home. Next day I get a call, you're coming in the office today. The commander wants to see you, squadron commander. It's our day off, but okay, I follow orders well, especially when you're in SAC, you follow orders well. Went in, Bill had been called in. The commander calls us in his office. We tell him the story. Bill has his notes. He's reading off the names that were involved. The commander says, can I see that? He gave it to him. He tore it up, threw it in the trash can, and said, this incident never happened. You're never to talk about this again. And at our next crew meetings, we had some unknown officer in uniform, maybe OSI, maybe not, tell us nothing happened, don't talk about it, it's top secret. So that was that. Flash ahead to July of 2008. Watching Larry King live, actually channel swapping. It was a Friday night because Larry did UFO stuff on Friday night. Some of it really strange, which was always fun for me to watch. And coming this a guy named Bob Salas talking about his incident. Bob Salas on Larry King Live ran across that. He talked about his incident. I thought he was the Quebec crew member until he mentioned about missiles going offline. My missiles never went offline. Then he talked about the date, which was in the 60s. Mine was 76. So I said, that's not my incident. You mean it's happened more than once? I thought mine was very unique. And Robert Hastings was on the show. You seemed very straightforward, very factual. It took me 5 or 6 months to get in contact with you. I went on your website, but I was worried that I was going to lose my pension, that people were going to come and I was going to be taken away and all these things that could happen. Because I later remembered that Bill and I were asked to sign a confidentiality statement, that we went and we said, we need some time. The commander said, you have 5 minutes. So we went and found a broom closet, to decide whether we were going to risk our career or sign the darn thing. So we signed it. So finally contacted you. You asked me for my story, and I told it to you, but no names were attached to it. I was anonymous, which was fine. Then you asked me to do an internet radio show where I said, okay, but let's use my first name. And then by the time the night occurred, I said, let's use the full name. Then you talked about this conference in Washington, D.C., not the conference, but the press conference that you had. And that's where I went and met a lot of the other folks that had similar experiences. At the end of that conference that you had, the press conference that you had, a young man that was a SAT team member at Quebec left you an email and wanted to talk to me. So you gave me his name and number, and I called him and we reaffirmed his story, reaffirmed the time frame, because he couldn't remember either the exact time frame. And he was on duty at Quebec and had a car accident, which the Quebec team told me about. They remember had a car accident getting away from this UFO, and they made a big joke of it, but this young man was very serious. He told me this story about approaching the LF. It had this big white thing over it with the beam coming down. In the process of running his checklist, he stuck his hand in this beam to shut something off, and it spooked he and his deputy, and they hopped in the car and they raced off and had an accident. And he was very relieved to talk to me because he was ridiculed back at the security police area. Someone had sketched them in their car with them drinking and hitting things and laughing and all this stuff. So he was devastated by that. He was a very sensitive guy. So he was very happy that he had relieved himself of this. I said, fine, now let's contact Robert Hastings. And you can tell him your story anonymously. And in fact, when I said that, he said no. He said, I got this off my chest. I'm feeling relieved. We're done. I don't want to talk to anyone, even you, and he has not.
You have had lots of time to think about what happened that night, and you've since heard stories from other missileers, ex-missileers who had similar incidents. What do you think these objects are? Where are they from? Who are flying them?
Well, you know, right after it happened, I thought there was several different possibility answers. One was a joke, which would never happen in SAC with 6 or 7 folks involved. One was it was a Soviet aircraft, a new Soviet aircraft that was checking our nukes out. Another one that was a U.S. new aircraft that was doing tests on our security, our response to security, a standard evaluation, if you will. And another one was that if it's none of those above, then it's some higher intelligence not from any country in our world. So the thought was, if you want to use the word extraterrestrial, it was outside of our space as far as I'm concerned.
Earlier, you mentioned that at the time you were getting the report of this object, cigar-shaped object above your launch control facility. You were going through your mind as to what possible explanations might account for that. But now, all these years later, have you come to some conclusion as to the likeliest explanation of what that was?
Well, the likely explanation to me is that some higher intelligence outside our world visited us, and maybe has and has continued to, and decided that they wanted to turn off nukes. I'm not so sure that they couldn't turn them all off. And, you know, my discussion with myself is, why would they do that? Do they love us that much that they don't want us to destroy ourselves? Or are we a stop-off point where they get some raw materials, something from the ocean, oxygen, water? They're using us for raw materials, and they don't want to lose this place of raw materials.
Why are you speaking out about this?
Well, I think it's the right thing to do. Originally, I came forward because of Mr. Nye, the science guy, giving Bob Salas a hard time on that Larry King show. And I thought if Larry King thought he was one of the few people that had this experience too, that I could come forward and say, I had one too, it was later. Bob, you're not alone, like I discovered that night that Bruce, you're not alone with this experience. I don't know if that answers your question exactly.
Okay. You said initially that was your rationale for doing it. Are you of the opinion that the U.S. government should be candid with the American people about the reality of UFO incursions on nuclear weapon sites?
Well, you may not like this answer, but I'm going to give it. In my opinion, early on, they thought we can't handle the truth. We as a world population can't handle the truth that there are superior intelligent beings, maybe even making contact with some governments, maybe not. And it might disturb religious beliefs, it might throw financial items, financial concerns into an uproar, kill the stock market, whatever. So they felt we can't handle the truth. I think it was well-meaning. You know, we can't tell this story because the general population can't handle the truth. Much like Orson Welles caused a riot when it was not true. It was just a radio show. So now I still think, you know, it might still be because they don't think we can handle the truth. And I'm not so sure we can. I can. All the other fellows that have come forward, most people can, but I'm not so sure everyone can.